All right, guys, we're going to pick up from where we left off and everything. What we're looking at now is African Americans joining the war effort. What we need to understand is a lot of the Sons of Liberty, a lot of the patriots were African American. If you remember, Crispus Attucks is the first man to die in the Revolution, and he was an African American. So when we decided to go for independence, we immediately, African Americans were part of it in our mindset, especially in George Washington's mindset. And the Second Continental Congress comes to George Washington and says, listen, we need you not to take African American soldiers. And Washington's like, I don't understand why. They were already in the soldiers. Some of our better soldiers are already there. What's going on? And they explained to them that North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia probably will not stay with the 13 colonies right now if we add African Americans to the soldiers. Not understanding why. Washington's like, well, why would they want to leave? And their excuse was that if they gave them guns, they would probably attack them. Well, then stop hitting them with a whip. That will stop people from attacking you right there. And so we didn't. I know it is a hot button issue at the time. It came up with a declaration and with Thomas Jefferson. So it is a lot of people pushing. The majority of people are actually pushing to stop slavery at this point. But if we were to lose Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia is one of the largest states at this time. We were afraid that if we lost those states, that we would not be able to battle England against it anyhow. And in fact, Washington is from Virginia, and he can't believe his state's trying to push this way and everything like that. But Washington then, so that we keep those three states in there, actually makes the concession to, hey, I tell you what, we will let all the African Americans that have already joined the military, they stay in. They don't leave. They are part of it. But I will not take new recruits. What happens then is you're going to have Lord Dunmore from England put out a thing saying that anybody that is an African American and will join the side of the British, they will get their freedom. At the beginning of the war, we have about 10,000 soldiers. England is going to send 33,000 soldiers over here. We're outnumbered 3-1. Do you know how many African Americans will actually leave America to join the British? 30,000. If we would have opened up, they could join us. We would have had 40,000 for us versus 33,000 for them. We would already have the advantage. But we went the other way with it and sent 30,000 more to them. Now, the British, because once again, America is going to be the first country ever to stop slavery and to abolish it. And so we're the first country to do that. What do they do with these free African Americans? Basically almost slavery to them again. They make them cooks. They make them the people that dig the ditches. They make them, so they are part of the military, but they are not any bit of the fighting force whatsoever. In so much fact that some will actually reverse their stance here in a little while. You ever watch Oak Island? Samuel Ball, the guy that was the cabbage farmer on Oak Island, was an African American from the Revolutionary that would move to Canada. Why? He was one of the ones who left to get his freedom and then got his freedom and moved to Canada. So in 1779, we're needing people and everything. And Washington actually goes to the Continental Congress at that point and says, listen, I'm reversing my order. I'm letting slaves join, free, unfree. They may join the military. Immediately, there's actually a huge group of them that had waited for us because we're offering freedom. No other country offers freedom, not just from slavery, but freedom to choose your own destiny, to choose where you live, to choose your job, freedom just in general. And so we have a huge influx into there, so much so that by the end of the war, 15% of our military is African American. That is, if you look at percentage wise, there's not 15% of the population is African American. So we actually have more African Americans fighting percentage wise for the United States than actually your Caucasian people. And so it's quite interesting the way it turned out. But like I say, 1779, Washington reverses that order. And I would know for the test, 15% of our army in the Revolution was African Americans. So now that we're into the battles and everything, New York is the first area that's going to happen. What happens is Washington goes out onto Brooklyn Heights. You've heard of Brooklyn, but Brooklyn in this day and age is not any of it a city. It is all woods. And so Washington goes out. He goes out onto a hill. They dig in fortifications. They dig in to be able to begin to fight. England is going to pull into the harbor with 33,000 people. But what they do for a couple months, the beginning of that year, is they bombard us. We're low. Supplies is our biggest problem. We've got to get some supplies. We're low on gunpowder. We're low on ammunition. We're low on cannons. They're not. And so they would be on their boats and just launch cannonball in at us while we're up on that hill. This is where George Washington will run into Alexander Hamilton one time in a cannon barrage. He actually sees everybody run. Hamilton does not, and he makes him his personal secretary. That's why Hamilton will fight at the end of the war. He wants to be involved in battle, and he was not. His war career was dig ditches and then become secretary until the very last battle. He does do some fighting. He does a horrible job of it, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. So Washington is on the hill. They're being bombarded. This is when Washington brings in his secret weapon. You'll see pictures of it here in a minute. It's called the Turtle. That shouldn't strike fear into your heart, but it will strike fear into the hearts of the British. It's interesting to realize this is the very first submarine. They actually have submarine warfare in the Revolutionary War. It is basically a barrel with a weight in the bottom to keep it just a little bit under the waves. It's got a little hand crank screw that you kind of move with it, and it kind of pulls you along, kind of like a paddle, and it's got a rudder for you to steer. You put it in the water, aim straight for some boat, and head over to it. Well, you're going to eventually bump into the boat. When you bump into the boat, it has an arm on it that has a barrel covered in tar, and it swings out and it sticks to the side of the boat. And then you start paddling away, going the opposite direction. And just like those firecrackers that have the string and you pull and it pops and goes out that end, this has a rope attached to it. And as you back away from it, it will stretch out and pop. It'll explode the barrel. If a barrel of gunpowder explodes under the water, it's going to blow a hole in the bottom of the boat underwater, which means it's not like cannons hitting the top. It will immediately sink and it will go down. So this is our plan. Washington sends it out. They stick it to the side. As they're backing away, it's a choppy night in the ocean, and the barrel actually floats off of the ship. And when the cord pulls, it explodes in the water, throws a bunch of water, kills a bunch of fish, but doesn't do any damage to the boat. We will not use it again due to the fact we are low on gunpowder, and we just wasted a whole barrel and didn't kill anybody. So at this point, then, submarine warfare is dead. But Washington's still up on the high ground on Brooklyn Heights. They will unload their troops. They are unloading all these guys at the bottom of the hill. They are going to unload these guys, and they start up the hill. 11,000 guys coming up the hill. 10,000 guys are at the top of the hill. That's us. It looks like we're doing a great job. We will end up holding them off at this battle to where they'll come forward a little bit and they'll back up, and then we'll volley back and forth, and they'll come forward and they'll back up. We actually think we're doing a good job. They want us to think we're doing a good job because they've unloaded 11,000. Remember, they have 33. They took the others around to the other side, unloaded another 11,000 behind us on the island. And now they are marching towards us. And then all of a sudden, you've got 11,000 in front, 11,000 from behind. We're trapped in the middle. And so what happens right there is we bust out, flee every which way we can to get out of there. Washington is going to flee, and his troops, he's going to slowly regather them. By the time we get them all regathered, we are out on a peninsula. So Washington's troops are on a peninsula. At this point, the British have now came, and they come to one end of the peninsula, and you know what's going on. A peninsula means surrounded by water on three sides. The other side being blocked off by the British. It's now evening time. They have Washington trapped on a peninsula, which means next morning, all they got to do, come out there, kill us all off. Revolution's over, back to British country. So they bed down for the night. Washington knows we've got to get as many people as we can off of this peninsula and to safety. So we send a boat over to the other side. That boat, then, we learned our lesson with the current at Ticonderoga. They will actually run a rope back with it. And that will help these guys guide the boats as they go across. They can hold to the rope, go straight there, come straight back, go straight there, come straight back. And we begin to unload guys that night off the boats. We are going to unload guys all night long until the next morning. Now, We are going to have at Brooklyn Heights 1,000 men captured when they pinched us like that. So we're down to 9,000. We lost 1/10 of our military at that first battle, captured. Those guys are going to be placed on prison ships, and that is just a death sentence. You're going to die if you're put out there. The ones that are left were trapped on a peninsula. By morning, we've got 6,000 of them to the other side. We still have 3,000 to go, and the sun is coming up. Washington has already said he's going to be like the ship captain, go down with the ship, last person off. And so he's not left. He didn't leave already. When the sun comes up, I know if you've seen fog in the morning, it's hard to see. You may be able to see a couple hundred yards out, but not much past that. And also fog is lasts short time. And once the sun comes up, it's gone. Well, the sun is starting to come up, and they said a fog rolled in, just heavy fog. How heavy of a fog? You couldn't see 6 feet in front of you. That means if you're in a car, you can't see the end of the hood. That is insane. That is such a thick fog. I have never seen a fog that thick. Well, Washington starts putting people in boats. Go, go, go. Maybe we'll get another 100 over there or something before the fog is totally gone and we're dead. So we keep moving them and moving them. And the fog stays. And the fog stays. And it stays. Y'all, it stayed. I want you to get this because you're going to have to decide what happened here. Whether you call it good luck, whether you call it God, whether you call it great fortune, whatever you call it. That fog stayed there until noon. Heavy, heavy fog. So much you couldn't see 6 feet in front of you until noon. We ran a rope. Are we able to go back and forth across this? Yes, we're moving rapidly. They said that everybody got into the last boat and Washington got into the boat last. And the fog didn't just start to dissipate. The fog literally just went and rolled up and was gone. They said the British are looking at Washington stand on the boat, waving goodbye, and he's crossing thing, and then we're gone and we're over. That is quite amazing. If it hadn't have been for that fog, we would have lost it on the very first battle. It would have been tragic for our country. So let's continue on to the next one then. There you can see that is the battle, and you can see right where we would have crossed over. You've got to remember, we think of New York as just a big city. New York actually has made up of several islands. You have Manhattan Island, Staten Island. There's several islands in the city of New York. Today, there's a bunch of bridges that run back and forth, but you can see right there what Washington was going up against. If you go to your next page of notes, you'll see an actual copy of the turtle right there and the diagram. It's in the Smithsonian if you would like to see it. All right, so what happens after that? It is, like I said, it is like a Sweet Plains football game. We are going to lose and lose and lose and lose and lose and lose. We lose at Kips Bay. We lose at Harlem Heights. We lose at White Plains. I mean, we're being destroyed. Kind of like the football team, the Sequoia Squaws. The basketball team is the Chiefs. We've seen the football team play. Bunch of squaws. All right, so we keep losing. And at this point and everything, we have one fort left. It is the Fort Washington. There's going to be 3,000 colonists in there at this point. What happens now is going to be a rough thing to deal with. There is a thing called a Hessian. And a Hessian, it's like a mercenary, except they're not the ones paid. There is a Hesse-Cassel region over in Germany, and the king is paid to have his soldiers come and fight in another place. These guys are like Spartans. From age 4, they're in the military, being trained to shoot, trained to knife fight, trained to hand fight, trained to all this stuff. These guys are literally animals, worse than you could imagine. I mean, they are SEAL Team 6 is the best way to put it. And what does England do? England hires them, about 2,500 of them, to come over here and attack us. Y'all, we're not going to make it through this. If we have to fight the Hessians head to head, we will not make it. At Fort Washington, they storm the fort. They literally just destroy the people in there. There's a lady named Molly Corbin. Her husband dies fending a cannon. She takes over and is helping him, the Patriots, shoot the cannon at this point. And that's where the Hessians bust in and they bayonet her, and her dead body is right on top of her husband's body. So we're already seeing that we have women even participating in our fight for freedom here and everything like that. But at the Battle of Fort Washington, they capture another 1,000. We've got the other ones are killed, and it's just, I mean, brutal. The Hessians, like I said, their king gets paid. How do they get paid? They're allowed to pillage and plunder anything they want and then steal that as their reward. To give you one example, and this will make you sick to your stomach when you hear this, of what these guys were like. After Fort Washington, they go house to house and they're trying to make their payment by killing and taking what they want. They went into one house and the lady had like a 3-year-old son and an infant. And they took the lady out into the yard and they gang raped her. And then to add insult to injury, they went into the house and brought out all the baby items, baby clothes, baby crib, anything that was baby item, and burned it in the yard. So that not only the lady would have the humiliation and the pain from all the things they did to her, then she's then got to hold her baby with no clothes as the baby cries and the baby's miserable, just to add insult to injury. Guys, these are men that if we go head to head on, we're going to die. There's no way we are beating the Hessians in war. So once again, if you see there's Fort Washington, if you're at the next play, and you can see how that worked out. There is some neat facts if you've ever noticed that Hessian helmet and everything in battles and pictures and stuff like that of the Revolutionary War. The gold helmet always symbolized the Hessian. So that leads us to Trenton and Princeton. It is now winter, and an interesting thing happens is there are rules to warfare. They do not fight in the winter. And so when it gets to winter, everybody beds down. What happens is Washington, we don't have a safe city. We have to go out into the woods. We are going to camp in the woods in the winter for the entire winter. The Hessians actually go into Trenton and set up, take over, quartering act, take over the houses, kick the people out. There is now a town of about 1,500 Hessians. Another 500 are sent to Burlington. Another 500 are sent to Princeton. But we do realize when the winter is over and spring starts, we're going to have to go against 2,500 Hessians, SEAL Team 6, and we're going to lose. We're going to lose. So what happens is Washington comes up with a great plan. This is one of the most iconic moments in American history. We are camped down for the winter, and it is on a miserable winter. If anything, you're going to notice that the Delaware River, which we're about to cross, is starting to freeze over. To freeze running water, you need temperatures that are negative, and they need to stay there for about a week. It is in the negative teens and the negative 20s for about a week at this point, and they're camping outside. Ice chunks in the river. What does Washington do that night? He brings Thomas Paine in. You know him from Common Sense. He had just finished another pamphlet called American Crisis. He has Thomas Paine read it to the guys to fire them up, and then what happens is we put out all our fires so nobody can see us at all. We go down to the Delaware River and we begin to cross over the river and over the river, over the river, getting all our guys to the other side. It takes until 4 o'clock in the morning before we are all on the other side of the river. We've only got 2 hours basically before the sun comes up and our surprise attack is over. They have brought 3 cannons with them. They actually disassemble the cannons and pick them up and run with them. You've got guys carrying a barrel of the cannon running. We're talking about 2.5 foot of snow. It is 10 miles to Princeton. We're going to go on a 10-mile run through 2.5 foot of snow in negative 20 degrees on Christmas Eve, now Christmas morning. This is the last time in the world they think you would attack. We get to Trenton. We set up a cannon down each of the main 3 streets. And then Washington sends his guys in the back doors of houses, not the front doors. They go into houses. They start bayoneting the Hessians in the bed. Trust me, if you're going to have to fight SEAL Team 6, fight them when they're asleep. That's the best thing. And it was Christmas Eve. What had a bunch of 20-year-old gentlemen been doing with no supervision? They had all been drinking. So if you're going to fight SEAL Team 6, drunk and asleep is the best. Just going to throw that out there for you. If I have to fight an MMA fighter, I want him drunk, asleep, and actually chained up. Or I'm not going to win. So these guys are drunk. They're asleep. We start killing them in the bed. But the moment they hear the first gunshot, those guys are trained soldiers. They jump up, grab their guns, and they start pouring out the front doors. As they're pouring out the front doors into the streets, Washington has loaded these cannons with grape shot, which makes them the world's largest shotgun. And they start boom down the streets. They were making them Swiss cheese. The grape shot was just ripping through them, dropping every Hessian coming out. And then more would pour out and we'd fire it again. More pour out, fire it again. Our guys knew not to go out into the streets that way, but to go in through the back ways. And so we are literally killing them. Guys that last about an hour, and we have killed 1,000 of the 1,500 Hessians there. And then we retreat back across the river. The Hessians that are left are sent to Princeton. So they had about 1,000 Hessians over there and about 500 up in Burlington. So what happens then is now the Hessians are watching us. I mean, like hawks at the river, watching for us to see if we're going to cross again. So it is a week later. That makes, if you know anything, Christmas a week later is New Year's Eve. What are young 20-year-olds doing on New Year's Eve? They're drinking again. So Washington makes these guys build huge bonfires. They build huge bonfires up. If you've ever been around a bonfire in the dark, all of a sudden everything around it, you can see the bonfire, but everything around it gets darker. It's hard to see. Washington has all the guys making noise, acting like they're partying. And later in the evening, he tells 10% of his army, stay there, keep throwing wood on the fire, keep yelling, singing, laughing. So it sounds like a party. So the Hessians on the other side believe we're there celebrating New Year's. And Washington and his guys slip to the back, head down that way, cross over a bridge to Princeton, where the other Hessians are at. The Hessians are not going to be fooled again. They've got about 10% of their military doing patrols around the city of Princeton all night long in the cold. And so we don't attack the city of Princeton. What we do then is we come outside of Princeton, set up along the road. And when the morning comes and it's now New Year's Day, these Hessians every day train. There is not a day they take off, even if they're all hung over. So the next morning, they come out to do their practice. These guys have all been up drinking. They're hung over. What about the ones who are level-headed? And they're asleep now, aren't they? They just went to bed. We waited till they got a little bit away from Princeton, and then we hit them, and rain the bullets down on them. We're going to kill about 800 of the Hessians now. We dropped them from 2,500 to under 700 at this point. If Washington hadn't done this, we wouldn't be here, y'all. We would not have been able to beat the Hessians normally. We lay into the Hessians, and then we retreat back over. Washington has left a few soldiers back. The bridge we crossed over on, they've been smearing tar on it. When we run back across it, they light it on fire. You've been told not to burn your bridges. Burn your bridges if Hessians are chasing you, just so you know, all right? That is a solid excuse to burn your bridges then. We burn the bridges, which gives the remaining Hessians the opportunity to swim the creek in the middle of the night. In the middle of the winter. No, they're good on that, and they stay on the other side. And so we are able to then to flee and get back to our camp on the other side of the Delaware. So we will pick up there again the next time. Thank you so much. Talk to you then.